Today, we're ranking every major bomber of World War II, from the ones that barely made it home to the bomber so powerful it changed warfare forever. 12. Worst. Fiat BR-20 Cicogna, Italy. Picture this, it's 1940. Mussolini has just declared war and wants to show the world Italian air power. The plane they send into battle? The Fiat BR-20 Cicogna, which, by the way, means stork. And much like a stork, it was slow, ungainly, and had absolutely no business being in a fight. The BR-20 flew against Britain during the Battle of Britain, flew from Belgium, at night, in winter, without adequate heating for the crew. The men inside were freezing, the plane was underpowered, and RAF fighters picked them apart like it was practice. Italy quietly withdrew the unit within months. This wasn't just a bad plane, it was the wrong plane, sent to the wrong war by the wrong strategy. It earns last place not just because it failed, but because it was a waste of every single man who flew it. 11. Amiot 143, France. If the BR-20 was embarrassing, the Amiot 143 was heartbreaking. France went to war in 1939 with a bomber that looked and performed like something from 1931. Because it basically was. Fixed landing gear, a top speed of about 190 miles per hour. The Luftwaffe's fighters were doing nearly 350. French crews knew they were flying coffins, and yet they flew. In May 1940, during the desperate last days before France fell, Amiot crews flew daylight raids against German columns crossing the Meuse River. Losses were catastrophic. These men flew anyway. The plane failed them. The men didn't fail the plane. Remember that distinction. 10. Heinkel AT-111, Germany. Now we cross to the other side. The Heinkel AT-111 was Germany's workhorse going into the war, and workhorse is exactly the right word. It was dependable. It looked menacing with that distinctive elliptical wing and glazed nose. Early in the war, over Poland and France, it was genuinely effective. But then came Britain. The Heinkel AT-111's fatal flaw revealed itself over the English Channel. It was too slow and too lightly armed to survive in contested airspace without heavy fighter escort. The Spitfires and Hurricanes tore through them. Crews started calling escort missions Spitfire weather, which was their dark humor way of saying they expected losses. By 1942, a plane designed to be a frontline bomber had been reduced to a transport and a missile launcher. It didn't fail because it was badly built. It failed because the Luftwaffe never developed a true strategic bomber. The Heinkel AT-111 was asked to punch above its weight class, and it showed. 9. Dornier Do, Germany. Sometimes a plane survives history because of one moment. The Dornier Do, nicknamed the Flying Pencil for its slim fuselage, has that one moment. On August 18, 1940, during the Battle of Britain, a lone Do-17 dropped a stick of bombs that destroyed most of RAF Handley's ground infrastructure. One plane, one pass, one of Britain's most important fighter stations nearly crippled. It was the most tactically precise moment of the entire Blitz. But one great moment doesn't make a great aircraft. The Do-17 was outdated by 1941, outperformed by its own replacements, and phased out of frontline service. It was a brilliant aircraft for 1937. The problem is, the war didn't end in 1937. 8. Short Stirling, Britain. Britain's first four-engine heavy bomber, and a deeply frustrating aircraft to talk about, because the Stirling wasn't bad because of engineering. It was bad because of bureaucracy. When the Air Ministry gave the design spec, they required the wingspan to be under 100 feet so the plane could fit in standard RAF hangars. That single requirement strangled the aircraft's potential ceiling. The Stirling couldn't fly above 17,000 feet fully loaded. German flak batteries knew the exact altitude. They just waited. Crews nicknamed it the Flying Coffin. It had the highest loss rate of any RAF heavy bomber in 1943. It was pulled from frontline bombing in 1944. The men who flew it deserved better. The Air Ministry's accountants had doomed the aircraft before it ever left the drawing board. 7. Handley Page Halifax, Britain. The Halifax gets a bad reputation, mostly because it flew alongside the Lancaster, which is like being the second best guitar player in a band with Jimi Hendrix. Early Halifaxes had a nasty tendency to enter flat spins, which is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. Modifications fixed most of that. By the Halifax Mark III, you had a genuinely capable bomber with a useful defensive armament, good range, and a crew that had learned to trust it. Over 6,000 Halifaxes were built. They flew over Normandy, dropped agents into occupied Europe, towed gliders on D-Day, and served in coastal command hunting submarines. It wasn't glamorous, it was relentless. And sometimes, relentless wins the war. 6. Junkers Ju-88, Germany. If the Heinkel E-111 was Germany's workhorse, the Junkers Ju-88 was its Swiss Army knife. Level bomber, dive bomber, night fighter, torpedo bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, heavy fighter. The Ju-88 did all of it. It was one of the most versatile aircraft of the entire war, and unlike most planes that try to do everything and fail at all of it, the Ju-88 was actually good. It was fast. At 292 miles per hour, it could outrun some early RAF fighters. Its crews developed fierce loyalty to it. Over 15,000 were produced across the war. If Germany had built more of them and fewer of the exotic wonder weapons that Hitler kept demanding, the air war over Europe might have looked very different. The Ju-88 is the great underrated aircraft of the Luftwaffe, and almost nobody outside of aviation circles talks about it. 5. Avro Lancaster, Britain. Here's where the arguments start. The Lancaster is Britain's most celebrated bomber. It dropped the bouncing bombs on the Roux dams. It carried the 22,000-pound Grand Slam bomb, the largest conventional bomb of the war. It had the biggest bomb bay of any Allied aircraft, and it looked magnificent doing all of it. But here's what the legend sometimes glosses over. Lancasters flew without the kind of defensive armament that American bombers carried. They flew at night, in streams, accepting that some would be shot down so others could reach the target. Bomber Command lost 55,573 men killed during the war. Think about that number. That's not a statistic. That's a generation. The Lancaster was extraordinary. The men inside it were more so. It ranks number 5 not because it wasn't great, but because what comes next redefined what strategic bombing could be. 4. Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, USA. The B-17 Flying Fortress is the plane that defined America's air war. 13.5 caliber machine guns, a crew of 10. The name says everything about how it was meant to be used, a flying fortress that didn't need an escort because it could defend itself. Except it couldn't, not really. The Schweinfurt raids of 1943 proved that brutally. 60 B-17s were lost in a single day over ball bearing factories in Germany. 60 planes, 600 men, in one afternoon. The fortress wasn't invincible, it was just incredibly hard to kill, and there's a difference. What made the B-17 legendary wasn't firepower or speed, it was survivability. B-17s came back with engines missing, with half a tail, with holes you could stand in. They brought their crews home in ways that no other aircraft could match. And in a long bombing campaign, keeping your crews alive to fly again is how you win. 3. De Havilland Mosquito, Britain. A bomber made of wood, unarmed, and so fast it didn't need to be anything else. The de Havilland Mosquito is the plane that makes engineers smile and historians shake their heads in disbelief. It was built from balsa wood and spruce, partly because wartime Britain was short on aluminum. The Air Ministry initially hated the design. Too unconventional, no defensive guns. What were they thinking? They were thinking 415 miles per hour, which in 1941 meant German interceptors literally could not catch it. The Mosquito flew precision daylight raids, something the heavy bombers couldn't dream of. It attacked the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo. It bombed a prison in Amiens to free French resistance fighters. It marked targets for Pathfinder squadrons. It hunted V-1 rockets. The Mosquito didn't win the war by brute force. It won by being smarter than the problem. That's why it sits at number 3. 2. Consolidated B-24 Liberator, USA. The B-24 Liberator is the most produced American combat aircraft of World War II, more than 18,000 built. It deserves its own documentary, and almost nobody under 50 has heard of it. While the B-17 was getting all the press and the propaganda posters, the B-24 was flying the ugly missions. The ones over the Ploiești oil fields in Romania, the low-level raids of August 1, 1943, where 177 aircraft went in and 54 didn't come back. 5 Medal of Honor recipients in a single mission. 5. The Medal of Honor is almost never given to anyone who survives. The B-24 had a longer range than the B-17, which meant it covered the Pacific theater in ways the Fortress couldn't. It served in every theater of the war: Europe, North Africa, the Pacific, even the India-Burma theater hunting Japanese shipping. It was ungainly. Crews called it the flying boxcar. It was harder to fly, and it saved the war in the Pacific. History owes it more credit than it gets. 1. Best. Boeing B-29 Superfortress, USA. And here we are, the aircraft that didn't just win a battle or a campaign, it ended the war. The B-29 Superfortress wasn't just the best bomber of World War II. It was the most technologically advanced production aircraft the world had ever seen. Pressurized cabin, so crews didn't freeze and suffocate at altitude. Remote-controlled gun turrets operated by a central fire control system. A range of over 3,000 miles. A service ceiling of 31,000 feet, so high that Japanese fighters struggled to reach it. It cost more to develop than the Manhattan Project at the time. Think about that for a moment. More expensive than the atomic bomb program. And then, on August 6, 1945, a single B-29 named Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima. And again, on August 9th, over Nagasaki. 3 days later, Japan announced its surrender. 1 aircraft, 2 missions, 68 months of war ended. You can debate the morality of those drops until the end of time. Historians do, and they should. But you cannot debate what the B-29 represented. The absolute apex of what industrial civilization could build when it decided to throw everything it had at a problem. No other aircraft before or since has held that kind of weight, literally and historically.
If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like this one too. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Our channel is small, so we are replying every comment below. Comment any suggestion for future videos. Thanks for watching.